So I grabbed some action shots of actual wire installation and working on the wires. And this is what you see. Actually, this is all staged, but it's pretty indicative of what actually you go through. You can usually see the wires, or you can usually touch the wires, but it's often very hard to see the wires at the same time you touch the wires. So this has been one of the most physically challenging, easy schmeezy work that I've done on the boat to date. But anyway, it all starts with batteries, so let's get into the batteries. So electrically speaking, well, I've been putting this off for a long time because I know I really want a really nice wiring job, and I know it's just not in my genetic makeup. I know I'll get sloppy the further I go along, but I'm going to try to do it as neatly as possible, and I certainly want a good theory behind my electrical work, even if some of the wires aren't as pretty as a lot of the videos you see on YouTube. So if you're into perfection, you might as well just start watching another video now. If you want to see how I muddled through, hang in there. So let's talk boat batteries. Most boats, especially if you're going to be in unprotected water like offshore or a big lake, you better have two batteries. You better have one just for the motor to make sure the motor's always going to start. And then you have one for all your other junk, for your lights and your radio and your wash down pump and all that. So you go anchor in a lake for a couple hours and you get ready to start. A storm's coming up, the wind's blowing, your anchor's slipping, you're heading toward the rock jetty. You need your motor to start. And if you don't have separate batteries, something bad could happen. So most boats have separate batteries, and you need to be able to keep it separate. And my battery, my house battery and my start battery are absolutely positively not connected in any way whatsoever, except for the two ways that they are connected. So let's take a look at that. Okay, you hear that? That's an old-fashioned solenoid, like all cars used to have. And then it's mounted right back here on the wall. It's that right there. So what that lets me do is, if I have a weak battery and the motor doesn't want to turn over quickly, or if it's really cold, or any other reason that the motor doesn't kind of want to start, I just have to push that momentary switch, the solenoid engages, and both my batteries are now connected together. I don't have to mess with the old-fashioned red 1-2 both off switch. And I can't accidentally leave it on, because as soon as I take my finger off that bucket, it turns off. So this is one of the ways the two batteries are connected together, and it only connects together when you have your finger on the button. The second way is this little magic box right there. It's called the Blue Sea Battery Link, and it's a little computer chip driven relay, and it's really smart. And what it does is it lets the outboard motor charge the start battery. So you use the battery, start the motor, and the outboard replaces the energy that you've lost. And then when it realizes that your start battery is up to snuff, it connects the outboard amp charging system, and this motor has 50 amps of charging, that's a pretty good bit, to the house battery. So you get to charge both batteries, but you don't have to rely on the red battery switch and forgetting which one's hooked to which. It will automatically keep both batteries charged, unless you run down the house battery quicker than the engine can charge it. And in that case, when it senses that one of the batteries is too low, it disconnects. So you can't drain one battery from another battery, because it won't let you. So that's my battery system. Two batteries, totally separate, except for the automatic charging relay and the manual starting solenoid. That's it. And they're both just plain old batteries. I don't have a deep cell for the house battery because I don't have a way to charge deep cell. Deep cells have to be charged differently than regular batteries, and if you don't charge them differently, they don't last. You don't get your money's worth out of them. So Just regular two regular batteries. Now, if I get a trolling motor, that's a whole different deal. Those will be different batteries, but these batteries are not to charge a trolling motor.
Right off the bat, I could not find switch panels that were acceptable. There are very nice ones, but they're ridiculously expensive. And the cheap ones on eBay with the 5 amp switches, I just didn't have any faith in. So I cut my own switch blocks out of aluminum, and I really like this anodized aluminum, but it was just so thick that I didn't think the switches would lock into it properly. So I found a better thickness. It's actually the old dashboard, and I'm cutting my own switch panel, switch supports.
I cut my first hole, and it's quite doable. I'm sure I'll get quicker as I go along, and this little thing snaps in just right. If I'd used that thicker aluminum, these little tabs wouldn't have locked it in, so this is better. Definitely need to drill 4 holes. That'll make it a lot quicker. The WD-40 helped out a lot, and I can get really close to the line with the jigsaw running slow. So pretty happy with this. I'm going to go ahead and cut 4 more on this one, and then I'm going to cut 3 more of these. So I should be able to get this out by squeezing these little prongs and pushing. There we go. Okay, I'm going to production mode here and see how fast I can cut these things.
So I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to do this in the beginning, so I ordered 1 switch from Amazon, and I used that to determine the hole size, and it's really quite doable. So later on, when I ordered the majority of the switches, apparently it's a different manufacturer. I thought these would all be the same size, but they were a little different. So I had to file the holes bigger, which was no big deal. But at that time, all these plates had been painted, so it was a little bit aggravating. But I managed to file all the holes bigger without messing up my paint job. I've got the saw set really slow. It's easy to get this aluminum hot, and it melts into the blade, and then it quits cutting. So a little WD-40 helps. A little light pressure. It's really not hard at all to cut this aluminum with the jigsaw. Just got to be patient. So the switches I'm going with are 20 amp, and I was kind of thinking they'd be American made, but they're Chinese. But anyway, they're not the cheap Chinese, they're the better grade Chinese. And they have a little light that you can set to either come on all the time with a switch or come on when the switch is on. And I wired it to come on when the switch is on. So now I'm fine-tuning all the holes with a file and using my 1 switch to make sure they all fit okay.
Okay, I got 2 that are finished. They're sanded clean, got some mounting holes, and then they're ready to go. And I got 1 that I messed up. So we've been scratching our heads here, and I think I got a start for cutting holes into the console. My goal right now is to keep this clear in case maybe Santa Claus brings me a chart plotter one day and a good fish finder. So for starters, the engine tack I'm going to put here. I have a fuel gauge, and I have a little depth sounder that reads in the digital screen. I probably wouldn't put that except that I already own it, and I've never used it. It's brand new, so I'll probably put that there kind of like a backup. Louisiana has a lot of shallow water, so you can't go wrong having too much depth in it. The start panel will go here, and I have made up 3 of these 5-place switch panels. Boy, it's time to start cutting up this dash and turning it into Swiss cheese.
with my history of getting measurements wrong and my dyslexic tendencies, I promise you, I measured these things like 15 times before I put the grinder on them. And it came out okay. I got lucky.
Okay, I got the 3 little panels lined up, spaced out as well as I can get them spaced out, and I'm fixing to drill bolt holes. So I'll probably drill 1 hole and drop a bolt in, and then keep on doing that to try to keep them from Okay, the switch panels are in, and I'm probably going to paint them black. I got a coat of varnish on them, but this is from a different piece of aluminum than the first 2. It doesn't really match. So I'll take them off and sand them a little bit, spray them black. All the other instruments will have black backgrounds, so it'll look better.
Starting out with this little fuse panel, I went with fuses instead of breakers. Just seems simpler to me. I'm going to mount them on that wall, but that's a solid fiberglass wall. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have embedded some wood in the console just to make it easier to attach all the little electrical pieces parts, but I didn't.
So I got my switch panels painted, they're ready to go in, and all my switches came in the mail. So I got to start thinking, or I got to decide which switches are going to go where, because they're not all the same. There's one off on off, there's 2 momentary ons, and the rest are just off on. So do a little head scratching, get them all stuck in these holes, and then I can mount the panels into the boat. I just need to write these down so I'll know what's what.
Now I've got to deal with the new switches being a little bit different in size, and some of the different switches are different sizes. You would think they would all be the same, but they're not.
So yesterday I mounted the Evinrude gauge. It's kind of an all-in-one deal. And today I want to mount the fuel gauge right here. Now this is the original gauge that came out of the boat. It matches up with the original sender that's in the tank. I do not know if they work or if it works. So I'm going to take the sender out and make sure these 2 work together before I mount this. And I would just buy brand new, but in the houseboat we bought brand new and we had a lot of trouble with them. We ended up using the originals because they worked better. So these old ones work correctly. I'm not going to bother buying new ones because they're probably just better made. I don't know. So I got the sender out, and the first thing I'm checking is to see what ohms it is, because that's how it works, by resistance. So with the tank all the way empty, I would have 249, 250. I think the industry standard is 240. And with the tank all the way full, I've got 37, 33. So this is pretty much right on what it ought to be. So now I'm going to hook it up to the gauge, which is really just an ohm meter, and make sure that they work together. And if it does, then I'll install this in the tank permanently with some sort of sealant. It's been on the tank, but it's just been kind of loose. I need to do something permanent. So I've got a hot and a ground coming from the battery. The ground grounds the gauge, and I have another ground to ground the sender. I have a wire from the sender in the gauge to the sender in the sender, and I have a hot wire to the ignition thing. So it should work. So with it all the way down, I don't know if I can hold this all the way down is empty, all the way up is full. All the way down is empty, all the way up is full. Shoot, yeah. So this gauge is going in and the sender is going in for permanent, and I need some sort of sealant to keep the gasoline from leaking. So I cut a gasket out of real gasket material. I'm getting ready to put it back in the tank. Fuel tank senders have 5 screws kind of universally. They're not centered. They only go one way, but they're very close, and it'll drive you crazy if you don't know. And they do that because the sender might work in one direction, but if you turn in another direction, it might hit a baffle. So they only go one way, and I got mine marked, so it'll be easy to put it back. And if you pull it out without marking it, and it's in a difficult place to reach, you can catch hell trying to get all the bolts back in. This one will be easy.
Once again, I found the use for scraps of fiberglass from the old boat parts. I am making supports for the running lights. Back in the day, everybody mounted their running lights on the front of the boat, on the cap, or on the side of the hull. And now the fashion is kind of to mount them on the side of the console. It didn't really work for me. I think my T-top post would have blocked too much of the light. I'm mounting them on top of the T-top top and get good visibility with the running lights. It's a little quite not right because your anchor light or your all-around light is supposed to be 3 feet taller than the running lights, and unless I raise my little pole up higher, I'm not going to have that. But for now, this is where the running lights are going to go. I epoxied these down, and now the epoxy's set, and now I'm putting a little more epoxy, fill it, kind of clean them up a little bit. And first I was thinking I'd go ahead and glass them in, but I've kind of changed my mind. I think if I hit a tree limb going down the road, I'd just assume that they break off and not take a big hunk of the T-top with them. So they're more than strong enough, so just putting this fillet and calling it good.
Comes to this off-on switch, so I can turn off power just by opening the door. And then the hot wire goes back up here. It's way oversized, but it should take care of all the house voltage. And then this other big cable goes to the back, and that's the one that hooks up to the starter solenoid, so I can get electricity from this battery to help start the motor if I have to. I don't see it happening, but you never know. So I tried really hard to make all this neat, and except for all this junk here, which is the engine control module, which I haven't quite got all straightened out yet. I didn't do too bad. These are the 5 circuits coming from the top of the T-top. So I've pulled 5 circuits up here. One is just a circuit with the 14 gauge for future, like VHF radio or some little courtesy lights up in this box. One is anchor light, one is running light, one is this spotlight, and one is the horn. So this should take care of everything I need up here. Oh, so these are the hot wires. The hot wires go all the way over here to the switches. The other side of the switch goes back to here, which is fuses. So I don't have breakers, I have fuses. I like that better. And then my 6 pumps. I have 6 stinking pumps on this boat. 2 bilge pumps, 2 washdown pumps, a bait tank pump, and a pump out the fish box pump. That is these 6 wires. And there's the 6 grounds. And the same thing again. They go to the switches. The switches go back to the fuse panel. So it looks pretty ugly, but most of that got ugly when I started running this stuff with the outboard. I still got to get under the floor and make up the wires to the pumps and make that neat. Got a few little things to straighten up here, and I have absolutely no electronics yet. That's just going to have to wait for a while. I'm going to try to start neatening up some of this CRAP. The NEMA 2000 cable, all the extra I'm going to pull to the back. And the engine, this would be power to the switch. I'm going to pull it all to the back. And I have this roll from the depth sounder all to the back. So all the wires that don't have to be here, I'll roll them up and screw them to the inside of the transom where they're not in the way. So we spent a few hours in here, and it doesn't look that much different, but it looks a little different. I got the network bus bar fastened, and I pulled most of the excess cables back to the back of the boat where I can roll them up and they won't be in anybody's way. I still don't have the the engine console plugged in, so all this stuff I can't do a whole lot with. But for the bilge pump, front one and the back one, I've wired them straight to the battery. And I did that so that if you come to the dock at night, you can turn off the battery switch, turn everything off, but you still have the bilge pump able to work on the float switch. Now, for some reason you need to turn it off, there is a switch here. But I did that with both bilge pumps. You can turn off the battery switches and the bilge pumps are still functional. I did get the control wires to the fuel gauge and to the depth sounder, and I got those little bitty wires soldered up. And I got another little bus bar right here, which is just for accessories. So when you turn the key on, this bus bar will heat up. And that may be all that goes on it. I don't know. May have to put something on there later. But for now, it's a little better. But it's slow going, and until I get the engine computer plugged in, I'm not going to be able to finish it. I've coiled up the engine control cables, and they're back here behind the bait tank, pretty much out of the way. And the factory battery cables are a little long, so they have a loop, but I'm really hesitant to cut those. I think I'll just leave them like they are. And this morning, with the exception of the engine control cables, which are not quite finished, I pulled the last two wires, and these are to the float switches. There'll be a high water alarm. I have one in the front and one in the back, and they'll be hooked to a buzzer and I guess a light, which I don't have. So other than that, I think I'm finished with electrical. Everything's terminated, pulled. Underneath the hatches, everything's neat and secure. Just need some, I need to get my electrical for the engine straightened out. So, could have been better, could have been worse. I'm happy with it. Everything's good.
What does it do?
So, by the way, if you're ever running down the river at night and you see a red light and a green light, you're in trouble.